in short, give yourself plenty of time. I think the idea, because that kind of end of that question was interesting, which is what if you're done earlier than your launch date? You're not.
Yeah, there's no end to the work.
There's no end to the work.
I've never heard a game developer go, "Hey, my game's done."
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 111.7 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I'm the summoner of robot armies.
I'm Sam, and I put nodes on things.
And today is September 25, 2017. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything can happen on this show. There's going to be swearing. That's it. That's most of it. So if you have a problem with that, then get out of here.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. So our last podcast, the month was September.
Yeah.
Now this month is September.
Yeah.
So are these two different months?
Yeah.
Or do we just have? So how many months does the Butterscotch calendar have?
52.
It's one month per week.
1 month per week.
Time flies over here.
It is kind of weird how we use days within those, where we just keep on adding one to the days even when the months recycle.
Yeah, you would think that's weird, but you'd be wrong.
That's true.
So,
I guess I hadn't thought about it in that way.
Yeah, we have a days that go somewhere in between like 28 and 31, and then they just restart arbitrarily. And then each week is a new month.
Right.
And months don't exist anymore.
To be fair, it doesn't make any less sense than the actual calendar.
True. Yep.
So at least we got that going for us.
So it's fine. So, hey guys.
Welcome to September.
Welcome to September.
Also, September is the beginning of fall, like legit.
September,
fall, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure
fall started.
Equinoxed.
We equinoxed super hard last week.
I'm excited for Jacktober.
Jacktober is pretty good.
Which is, of course, the month where everybody gets really jacked and then carves the shit out of some pumpkins. All right. I mean, it's hard to get like that. It's hard to get the knives.
Get the knife in there.
Yeah.
You gotta work on
you
your
get
strength.
jacked by making your jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah, because the thing is, when you're carving a pumpkin, you don't want it to take 12, possibly 13 minutes.
No.
You know what I mean? Like
too long.
That's too long. You got to get that down.
To
you got to get that down to like 6, maybe 7 minutes.
I will say, I actually bought pumpkin carving tools and a little scooper thing last year.
Yeah, so did I.
Probably like $8. And usually I'm just like, I'll just use a spoon, do this by hand. It took me like 30 seconds to completely remove all of the innards from a pumpkin with this tool.
This is a tools problem.
And
turns out it helps.
I have been ruining my entire pumpkin making existence. It was so fun to make pumpkins.
Was it the shitty kit too? Because I got a shitty kit.
It was the shitty kit. It was amazing.
It's like $3. Now imagine if you get super jacked,
do that.
Well, in that case, why don't you just punch holes into the
It's going to be like a predator situation where you just grab the top of it, you rip the guts out. And then hang it as a trophy on a tree.
The pumpkin turns around and faces you, and it cuts an X into its own chest. It's like, face me. Also, speaking of the right tools for the job, I've been accumulating boxes in my garage. Just mountains and mountains of boxes.
So our studio is in Seth's basement, which means that studio members take out the trash routinely. But
that's it. They just take it out into the garage.
Yeah. So when we get a new box, so if we get like a new monitor or something like that, everyone you'll take the monitor out, and then you're just like, I'll just take this upstairs. For whatever reason, I think there's no connection.
We never settled on the process of disposing of box trash. So there isn't one.
I literally haven't thought about it. I was just like, I'll put this box upstairs.
Yeah.
So where all the other boxes
So boxes have this. Well, it has this problem where they're full of styrofoam, but you can't recycle. Right. You gotta throw that. And you want to recycle the cardboard. So you need to go through this elaborate process of like getting all the trash out. Styrofoam is big. You got to break that down, put that into a trash bag. Then you got to take the box and figure out like, how do I get this giant fucking thing into my recycling? Well, you got to cut it up. You got to break it down. Right. So my Saturday afternoon was, I ordered a box cutter last week and got it on Friday. And I just spent all Saturday afternoon it was like a lightsaber battle.
Is this a year and a half of boxes that you accumulated?
No, because I cleared out the garage completely by like May. So I was able to park in there and stuff. It was great. And then
now it's just boxes.
And then we got some new equipment and stuff, and then it just piled right up again. And so but man, that box cutter, it's just like your pumpkin thing. Yeah. I mean, I just gently sort of wave it toward a box, and the box just explodes into little strips. So It's always good to have the right tool for the job.
It's wonderful. And sharp tools.
Speaking of tools, I did finish my warehousing, which we talked about in the last 2 podcasts, I think, briefly.
It is now renamed, though.
It is renamed with an H because I kept telling people it's called warehouse. It's an organizational beast, which I thought was amazing.
Well, and also if you read it, it's like warehouse.
Yeah.
So anyways,
It's all very confusing.
There's a damn H in it now. It's
also a D at the end.
Well, that's if you have done it.
Oh, I see.
It's a verb, So
Sure,
I warehoused.
But a Z at the end. Now it's a zombie game.
Yep. I warehoused one this weekend. But yeah, so I finished all that stuff, which is super fun, and everything's just packed away, and I now know everything that I have in my basement, which feels really good. And we were going through stuff, and I realized I got coloring books, I got markers, I have a whole craft kit. I could. If
I've got
safety scissors.
I do. If one day we were like, hey, we need some construction paper. We're gonna make some like cute cards for some reason.
Like, we don't need to buy any. I got some. In my warehouse,
and I can always just check, and it's amazing. So, anyways,
it's pretty good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Speaking of tools and building things, Andy had a productive week last week.
Yeah.
So he finished building the Shenanifeed.
What's the Shenanifeed?
Shenanifeed is our in-house sort of microblogging tool.
Yeah, I call it microblogging.
Like a professional journal.
Yeah, so we do a thing in the studio where we realize, so we have a studio philosophy called Always Know Why, where you're supposed to, anytime you finish a day of work or a project or whatever, you post-mortem it. You got to reflect back on what you were doing and try to think, like, how did that go? How could it be better? How could I do it better? All that stuff. And so we realized that, we could just sort of lightly suggest that everybody do this, but it won't necessarily happen unless we have a good system to encourage everybody to do it, and also so that other people can learn from what everybody else is doing, right? So Andy put together a thing that we called the Shenanifeed quite a while ago, where it's like an in-house microblogging thing where at the end of each day, everybody goes in and writes up about what they got done that day.
It takes you like 15 minutes or so. So you just kind of, you compile all the stuff you did, and then sort of your both why to someone who doesn't have the context of why it would be important, why this is important, and then if you learned anything, you're going to be rolling forward.
Yes.
So, and then everybody can see everybody else's stuff, and you can comment, tag people, that sort of thing.
Yep. And so the first sort of prototype of it got the job done and everything, but then Andy's been working on front end web development, and so there's all these extra features that we wanted to get in there. And so he got it wrapped up last week, and it's quite shiny.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
So congrats to Andy on a big project.
Yeah. And speaking of other projects, we also realized that we have a problem.
Huge problem.
Which is launching games is boring.
Yeah. Let me describe this for you. So you've worked on a thing for 2 years.
You put your heart, your soul, your blood.
And now it's walking around with
tears.
all of your guts.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's disgusting. And you need to launch it, right?
Right.
The problem is that launching a video game, the only thing you do is you click.
You click publish.
Okay. So
And then nothing happens.
like what other event in your life requires so much work to do and then ends
with nothing.
with such just a shitty sort of version of what that could be in terms of
the stores could assist a bit, because
they could put some fireworks in there.
confetti.
Yeah, because it's like Facebook now. If you just say the word congratulations, it like throws fucking confetti on the screen, right?
That's amazing.
That is pretty good.
Like why
Why do we settle for juice-free lives?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So we took this problem into our own hands.
Well, rather we were complaining about it.
Yeah.
And Andy was like, excuse me, you have a complaint? Because I can solve this problem.
Yeah. And we said, what we need is a lever. We need a giant fucking lever that what we do is we'll open up whatever the store is. We'll open up their developer backend. We will position the mouse onto the publish button. Then we'll go over to the lever and just crank that thing. And then it'll just send a click to the computer. We'll need to probably sync it up so that maybe there's some kind of like extra like music that plays. Like maybe it plays.
could do the bois.
Ooh,
The Inception sound, or maybe that followed by the final countdown, something like that.
Actually, no, I think when you go over to it, the final countdown should start. So there's a motion sensor, and then it starts when you get over there, and then it bois at the end.
And maybe we put like one of those little CO2 canisters inside the lever, and then stuff it with confetti, so that when you pull it, the end pops off, and
it also does that thing that goes peer 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 peer.
It's my favorite noise.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so good.
So the fact is, like, we need this lever.
Now, that would be a moment, Then we could all have some booze out, so we all have a beer that we all clink it at the same time too, like while this is all happening.
But I mean, like, so this is the kind of thing that should happen at a launch party.
Yeah.
Is like the launch happens when the lever is pulled and confetti shoots out and you hear that weird air horn sound.
And then everybody who's involved should go away so that the dev team can put out fires that happen immediately.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is a good word of advice for devs out there. Don't have a launch party after the launch. No. Because you're dead.
You're going to want to wait at least a month or do it like 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
Because
it's a preemptive.
Things are kind of dead in that window, you know.
And you don't know what the future looks like, so it's all very exciting. And
it's like, what's going to happen?
Yeah. But I think also importantly, so I was reading, there's a book called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, which, have we talked about it yet?
Maybe.
It's a great book. Highly recommend. It follows 10 different games or 10 different studios developing 10 different games, ranging from like Stardew Valley all the way up to Destiny and talking about all the trials and tribulations. And I was laughing because in one of the chapters, I'm not going to like specifically point out, but in one of the chapters, the studio is having a lot of financial hardships, having to lay people off and all this stuff, and they finally hit some level of success. And the next line was something like the CEO addressed the workers at their lavish launch party, and I was like, God damn it, come on,
but
like, you just got that money,
put it in the right spot, please.
So if you're gonna have a launch party, do it before the launch
and do it cheaply,
and don't. You don't need to have a lavish launch party.
About invest your money in a giant lever.
It's kind of like having a $30,000 wedding and then not having any money to put a down payment on a house. Yeah, same kind of a. You gotta think about those priorities. So, anyways, so we have a couple other things to talk about. One is I have a traffic story.
Oh God,
this is not the kind of traffic story that you will be expecting.
All right.
So I live.
Tantalized. Tell me.
I live in a very quiet area. I often go out like for walks and stuff, and many times I will never see a car passing by. Right? It's very quiet here. And so we talked about regression toward the mean. Was it last episode or a couple episodes ago? And how sometimes randomness happens and creates very unusual situations. So I'm walking my dog and we're walking. I got the leash on and everything. And she's like, all of a sudden she's like, I got to do my business. And I'm like, all right, no problem. And for any of you who have walked a dog, you know that like once they start the business, they become a statue. They cannot be moved. They cannot be stopped until the job is done. Right. So she just decided, I got to do this in the middle of the road, like right in the middle. So she ran over there, stretched the leash tight, and then just started going.
Oh God!
I'm like, no problem.
Got a bag?
No big deal. Like I got a bag. There's no traffic. There's no cars. It's a quiet neighborhood, right? All of a sudden, I hear a car, and this SUV comes up, and he just like stops. And he's just looking at me, and I'm like, oh fuck. And then another car comes from the other direction. It pulls up, and they're both just sitting there, just watching. And this is like the longest shit I've ever seen my dog take. And I'm sitting there trapped between these two cars. Then a fucking third car comes up behind the SUV, and they kind of like squeeze out to the side, and I can see them like peeking out. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm just sitting here, your dog shit in the middle of the road. And then I'm like, well, I got to pick it up now because I don't want to have these people like drive over, So I'm like, fuck. So now I'm like, I got to get out the bag, and then she's just like running around on the end of this leash, and I'm like picking this thing up, and I'm just like waving at everybody. I'm sorry. So I created a literal traffic jam because of this. But this never happened. I never seen three cars at the same time.
How often does Coco just shit in the middle of the road?
Not very.
Never. Okay.
It's a pretty rare occurrence as well.
Especially a long one.
Yeah.
Apparently there's also,
it was like 2 minutes.
You had a stacking probability situation.
Yeah. That's good. So that's just one of those. Hey, sometimes life just shits in the middle of the road. Life finds a way. So that happened.
That's good.
That's a good traffic story.
All right. But then before we get to some questions, there's one other thing that I want to talk about, which is I want to talk about PUBG.
Well, everyone else is doing it. Why don't we hop on the fucking bandwagon?
Well, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So I had an interesting conversation with Shure this morning about PUBG. So he is very in tune with the Chinese gaming community. or the Chinese gaming industry, I should say.
Back up and say PUBG is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
Which is a battle royale game that came out a couple months ago. It's been crushing it in the charts. It's like the top played game currently.
Just ever. Yeah.
Right.
If you go to Twitch, it's like PUBG is like 200,000 people watching it. And then next is League of Legends with like 9 people now because they're all playing PUBG. And so this game, and actually I left my Eve Corp this weekend because they all stopped playing Eve because they're all playing PUBG now. And they've been playing.
You like actually left the corp completely?
They've been playing it for 4 months, and every time I log in, I'm just by myself, and I'm like, sorry guys, bye. Like I gotta go find somebody else to play with now. So this game is just like sucking the oxygen out of the room. You know,
I heard that it actually took away some like 50% of CS:GO's players, and So I
those
mean,
players got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Like these players didn't manifest from the ether.
You got a big enough game that it's like a bonfire. It's just like sucking the oxygen out of the whole ecosystem.
Happening.
That's crazy.
So I was thinking about
that could actually implode other companies because a lot of those companies are dependent on the expectation that their decay rate won't be that strong or that they have some growth over time or whatever. But if some other game comes in and just literally takes all your players.
I'm glad I can say that we have basically nothing in common in the games we make with PUBG.
Yeah.
So hopefully
and we don't,
our markets are
and our
slightly-
success is relatively
think about,
so low, we don't have a lot to lose.
Correct.
You know?
But I
Small
mean,
potatoes.
Eve and PUBG are so far apart.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, and like what else? League of Legends. Like you got this
they're not
fantasy
similar.
3v3.
But they're multiplayer communal games. You know, I mean, they actually are very similar to the underground
they
DNA.
They have that, but yeah. So I tried to, and I think we talked about this a while back, like around when PUBG was first kind of starting a bonfire. I tried to play it, and I just didn't really have that good of a time. So I'm thinking back to process, and I was like, why though? Because everybody seems to be having a really good time playing this game, and I think it's actually because I played it with friends, which seems counterintuitive. So hear me out.
Okay, what do you mean?
So I love gaming with these folks. They're hilarious. And I was laughing the whole time, and like we were having a good time, but I didn't have a good time with the game.
Right.
And it was actually because I think in retrospect, I was playing with people who had already been playing the game for 2 months. So it was the three of them and
Skill
then me.
gap.
Yeah. And so we actually won when we played, but I felt nothing. Right. So like one of the things that makes PUBG exciting is it starts as 100 people, and then it whittles down until like everybody just shoots each other basically until eventually there's just one team or one person left. And it's like a last group or last person standing kind of a game. And, so as you stay alive longer and longer, and the sort of arena constricts smaller and smaller, that sort of feeling of like, oh shit, like this is it, it's just coming down to me. Like that sort of tension feeling is one of the big drivers of why people love this game. But when I was playing, I didn't feel that at all because I didn't know enough about the game. Like I shouldn't have been there. Like I shouldn't have been in that final round because I suck. Like anytime somebody shot at me, I had no idea where it was coming from. The only contribution I had to the match was that I accidentally ran over one of my own teammates with a car. Like that was my thing that I did. And so we talk a lot about how games exist to allow people to feel pride, right? And I wasn't able to do that because by the time we got to the end, I knew that I had only been a liability. Like I could not take any kind of ownership over this win. Right. And my teammates who had been playing for months, they just carried me straight through the whole thing.
It doesn't feel good to be carried. You feel like a baby,
Yeah. Babies get carried.
That's right.
And so I was thinking about like all the other times where like if I wanted to play Rocket League with somebody, if I want to, if I say, hey, I'll teach you how to play Eve, or like, hey, come play WoW, or like basically games that I've been playing for a long time. Anytime I play with somebody, it never lasts, right? Like they won't come back and keep playing. And I think it's largely because when you jump into a multiplayer game like this, you have to take the initiative to learn it yourself, and you can't depend on other people to teach it to you necessarily. Because if you're jumping in with people who have already been playing, then they got shit to do. Like they want to go play the matches and win. And like, they want to go progress and do all the important game stuff. And you're going to make their experience worse because now you're just sort of bogging them down and they're dragging you through. Right. So, that was kind of interesting. So I'm trying to decide whether I should take another crack.
It sounds like we should take a crack at it
because we all
as a bunch of sucky idiots.
Yeah.
There's a benefit to really being really bad at stuff, which is that you can be with other people who are really bad at it and super enjoy it.
Yeah.
Which there are always lots of people who are bad at stuff. So it's a good population to be in, you know?
Yeah. Which also kind of begs the question of games that have been around for a long time are going to suffer from this problem more and more. Right. So think about
to me, that's how CSGO and TF2 feel.
Because there was Overwatch.
Overwatch.
The first couple of weeks of Overwatch was hilarious because everyone's just like, oh, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, and I had a blast.
And then now if you hop in and you do something wrong, everybody's
so fucking serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're playing it wrong. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Of course I'm playing it wrong.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird because I think about like as games first get off, like as they first start taking off, they establish these communities. But then those games, they typically change a lot over time, like because they're online multiplayer games. They have patches and patches and patches. And as soon as you step away for like a 6-month period or something like that and come back into the game, it often feels like the game has left you behind.
Yeah, this happened to me with League of Legends.
Yeah.
Which I still pop in and play, but luckily they added this thing, which is basically like recommended items to buy. So I don't have to think about it anymore because I'm just like, I'll follow their recipe for whatever this character is that I'm playing because there's all this new stuff. I don't even understand what's happening most of the time. I just like new characters pop up. I'm just like, what does that one do? And they just briefly tell me and I'm like, all right, I'll do whatever I used to do all the time anyways. Like, let's just go. Yeah. So it is weird how in a multiplayer context that does happen, but I think that is what people want to a degree. Like you want a community, you want a place where you can belong. And then I think interestingly, I would kind of, I think, disagree with the carrying notion that it's like, that it always drags people down because, I mean, we've had this before, like you get a lot of personal gain and personal benefit out of just like helping someone do a thing. Like it feels good. It's just like a natural human thing. Yeah. So I think there is a benefit to that, but definitely when there's a point where your patience goes away.
Well, it kind of depends. So I think if I've got a couple hundred hours into Rocket League, right? Let's say I had like a couple thousand hours and one of my big goals in Rocket League was like getting a, platinum, whatever the fuck is their top, their top tier. They change it every season. So I don't know. So I want to get platinum turbo rocket medal. And that's my thing. So if you're like, hey, I want to learn how to play Rocket League.
Yeah, you don't have time for me anymore. You're a pro.
Yeah. Cause the fact is like every time that I have, every moment that I have to play Rocket League, I want to be working toward that goal. And I'm actually like sacrificing my progress toward that in order to teach you. And I don't even know if you're going to keep playing or not. Right.
Although I think this is particularly interesting because this also perfectly describes why we have stopped teaching people about game dev and basically anything. It's the exact reason because the skill gap grows over time because we're doing this full time. 100% of our time is now this. Every moment we're not doing it
is a big cost.
And that gap is getting wider and wider between the people who, want to be doing the same stuff and where we are, which means now that just the size of that is getting bigger and bigger and the relative cost is getting higher and higher. And then again, we don't actually know if people are going to give a shit in the end.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of depends on the approach. So we started making these YouTube videos and stuff.
Yeah.
Primarily because that's now something where we can just do it once, teach that concept and then put it out there. And then, as with all things, a very small proportion of people are actually going to engage, like are actually going to care and are actually going to put in the time to get something out of it. Problem is you have no idea who those people are going to be. Yeah. And so you go teach a class, like you can go teach a class of, 20 or 30 people and maybe one of them will actually like really take the stuff that you're talking about and run with it and try to like use it and go all in on it. But also maybe not, maybe none of them will. Right. And you just spent your entire like semester or whatever,
just burning your time.
Yeah. And so that's kind of it's part of the advantage of having the internet is you can now broadcast those lessons out there, do them once, and then just whoever
pick it for themselves.
Yeah. Whoever can use them can use them. So,
but I just thought it was interesting that it's the same problem actually as with this.
Well, it's the better you get at a thing, the higher your goals go.
Yeah. And the higher the opportunity cost of you not doing
that thing. Yeah.
And the larger the gap between you and somebody who you may want to teach even, or who wants to learn anyway.
I think this is the thing.
So the harder it is to actually pass your skill down because the gap is
it's harder for you to remember what they do or do not know.
Well, we had this question come up, I think it was probably 50 episodes ago. It was a question of finding mentors.
Yeah.
And there's just one thing you got to do, which is you just have to demonstrate that you really give a shit and that you will do the things that have been suggested that you do. If you do those things, then, because the thing is, I think the part that people don't realize is that if I'm looking at someone who's asked for help in some regard, if it's the case that they come with sort of like, they say, hey, I followed this, and this, and here's sort of a thing that I'm having trouble with. Would you mind giving me some feedback on this project, whatever else? If I do elect to give feedback on it, and then like 3 months later, I get a note from them that's the same thing, where they clearly did not take the feedback, whatever else, then I'm done. Because the truth is, like, I'm investing time.
You're
anytime as a
spending
mentor.
time that
Right.
you could have been doing
Exactly.
working on.
And I think a lot of
stuff.
people don't understand that's the reality of that give and take, which is
Mentors aren't just giving you time.
Right.
They're sacrificing their time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just have a shit of free time lying around. They're busy. You know? So-
so you've got to always demonstrate that you are paying attention and using the words that are given to you from the person or the time.
Yeah. Very interesting. All right. Well, let's get on to some questions.
Okay.
These questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. So if you would like to get your questions on the podcast in the future, head on over there, slap them in the text box, and don't forget to click the submit button, or else we won't get them.
Absolutely.
So it's a common,
That's how the internet works.
It's a common problem.
Though we could probably just ask the NSA for all the
The
all the
keystrokes.
keystrokes, and we
true.
could probably put it back together.
We could, yeah, that seems like a lot of work though.
Yeah, we'll probably
but it's
just
probably worth it. There's probably a lot of really good questions that have just been lost to the
NSA.
NSA.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah. All right. So first question comes from Rampandapus. How important is it for games to have progression systems, such as leveling up, upgrading equipment, gaining new abilities, etc.? Could reliance on progression systems be a game design crutch?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. So,
Well, what's a crutch?
well,
It's also a good question.
a crutch is the thing that props up something.
Sometimes things got to be propped up.
Sometimes
though.
it's a thing that's kind of limpy in the case of usual usage of a crutch.
Mm.
You got a thing that's kind of broken. When you put crutch on it, seems like it's moving around just fine.
But sometimes you got crutches for legs, and that's just how you get around.
Well, because I guess
true.
what I'm curious
Yeah.
about is what makes something a game design crutch versus something that's just a part of
I guess
game
to
design.
me that it would be a thing that you use just because it's a thing you can use, and not because you've thought about it.
which
so-
can be true of all
Which
things.
can be true of anything. I mean, we talked in the past about inventory
Mm-hmm.
systems and mechanisms and durability mechanics and other kinds of things that people just fucking throw into games without actually asking, what does this do and what is this for?
Well, there's also an interesting thing that happens in games in particular when you strap a progression system of some sort, any sort. So even for example, we say we have a big open world map and we have like 100 cool locations in it for you to go run around and discover. There's a difference in gameplay and feel if we just leave that open and let you go find them.
Welcome to the
versus
game. Here's 100 places.
If we say, here's your 100 places to go
Pick
find.
one.
Or even just say, here's your 100 places, like go to each one. Like that's now your thing,
Right.
Or you go to these 10 first and then you're allowed to go to these 10, blah, blah. And so I think the interesting thing that people sometimes don't realize is that you can accidentally sort of rip out some of the intrinsic drive of a player or of a player base to do something that is actually really fun, worthwhile for them by putting one of these power systems on there. And I think the easiest example of games that use power systems without an actual sort of base of interesting gameplay is clickers. It's not interesting to click on things.
It's only
a power system, right? So so there's that. And then on the other hand, you have games that are only gameplay based, like chess, right? So there's no progression except
Rocket
for your own brain. Yeah, Rocket League, that sort of thing. And then you have the sort of fine gradient between. But I think just if you choose, you just got to think about if the progression system that you're strapping onto a system is going to potentially rip out some of the intrinsic motivation of your player base for doing that thing. Because it can be the case that you can ruin an otherwise really interesting sort of fun experience that players can share within themselves by putting a system on it. And sometimes it's better not to have one.
This kind of happened with Tribes Ascend.
Mm-hmm.
It came from the Tribes franchise, which was these crazy first person shooters with jetpacks, and you could like ski down hills at 100 miles per hour, and it was the fastest shooter in the world. And then with Tribes Ascend, they also layered in XP. So every time you win or lose a match, you get a little bit of XP, and then you use that to sort of like
Upgrade your weapons.
Upgrade your
unlock
weapons.
new-
yeah,
what are they called? What are the
new
characters called?
characters,
Classes.
Yeah, so you can be like the fast guy who captures the flag, or like the heavy person who's got mortars and cannons and stuff. And it just didn't make sense in that context, because when you're playing a game like this where you see somebody who's, say, like one of the stealthy guys or whatever, you want to be able to know what they're doing so that you can.
Yeah, it's a skill based game.
Yeah. So this is why. So like in Team Fortress. I don't know how it is now, but how it used to
That's
be.
actually why
I guess Overwatch or whatever, where you've got predefined classes, which means you can learn about that class. You can anticipate what it's going to do. And so when you see somebody coming at you with that character, then you can plan what you're going to be doing, right? But if you have a leveling up system, as well as all this swappable equipment and stuff like that, like, oh yeah, you level up one gun, turns out you don't like it, you get a new gun, level that one up, right? Mm-hmm. Which means not only can you not predict what they're going to do, you also can't even predict how effective that's going to be, right? So like if somebody could shoot you with a lower level gun and it's fine. And if they shoot you with that same gun, but they've upgraded it, then now all of a sudden you get your ass kicked, right? Mm-hmm. And so we actually were playing around with this in Scuffle Buddies a little bit, which we can't talk about too much because we're keeping things secret.
But we've been very choosy about where we're putting these power systems into play, because we're very cognizant of that ruin that can happen if we put them in the wrong place.
Yeah, well, you can easily strip away predictability of various aspects of gameplay if the numbers just fly all over the place, right? So yeah, it's
tricky.
It's tricky. I wouldn't say it's a crutch though. I think it's a really powerful tool that you have as a game developer, and
it certainly can be a crutch. But in the same way that like a lot of extra juice and stuff, you could say is a crutch if the game,
or like graphics,
or graphics, that's a crutch.
That's a crutch,
right?
Because there are text-based games that are super fun, you know. So I think it just depends on how you use it.
A crutch is a tool.
Yeah. All right. Next question comes from Woland77. In these days of digital distribution, how do you decide when you're ready to launch a game? Do you set a launch date before it's done? What if it's not ready? What if it's ready early? What if? How does it work?
Okay, yeah. I think there's probably actually not many articles on how to think of the timeline for this. Because I remember when we first started trying to launch stuff, I looked around for them and I could not find what's like the range. When are we supposed to say that this is happening? What's a good idea? We used to be in the camp that I think a lot of game developers fall into, which is they just arbitrarily set a launch date.
Yeah.
Which is basically the dumbest thing you can do.
If you go back and look at our Crashlands history, it was like summer 2015. Yeah. No, it was spring 2015. Then later it was summer 2015. Then we just blew right past that.
You know, it would have been better if we just said, we'll launch it when it's done. Because the truth is, in that case, we didn't have a hard deadline yet because we still had enough of our tiny amount of money to be able to survive. So we were just going to keep working on it. So if it's the case that you are, working in a larger production setting where you have, for example, an investment or something like that, where you literally are running out of money, then you're going to need to figure out something to be able to say this is coming out on this date, because otherwise the company won't exist. But it really is the case that depending on where you're launching and how big the project is, that sort of thing, there's a few sort of components to a really good launch in terms of timing. So the first is that you need about 6 weeks of prep for the stores. And we've talked before about how the stores are basically your most important partner when it comes to actually making sales and actually having a really good launch. So you need to let them know. You got to get a person at least 6 weeks before what you think is probably going to be the launch.
Yeah, and it kind of depends too, because there are some platforms where they require 2-3 months in advance. Correct. So you need to know, you need to talk to the people who are your reps or whatever, or even just ask around.
Yeah, so in terms of speed, the console's the slowest for sure. There's a couple months sort of lead up.
Right.
And then you got basically like PC, you want to give them a few bits of time, but they don't necessarily care so much because a lot of it's, especially on Steam, a lot of it's algorithmically based.
Yeah.
And then on mobile, it's at least 6 weeks.
Right.
I think we've done as late as like 2 weeks, which seemed to work okay. But
I don't think they were super pumped about it, though.
Yeah. You don't want to make their lives hard by being like, hey, we have this great game that we just told you about right now, and we're going to completely mess up your docket for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then when it comes to beta stuff, so we started actually doing betas with Crashlands, which was very smart. So we take about 4 weeks for that. And then once the beta is concluded and we get everything fixed, then we set a launch date.
Because you don't know.
The beta tells you how much work is left.
Yeah, you don't know how many problems you're going to have until the beta's well underway.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good general rule. And as far as like following up with press and that sort of thing on I think both PC and mobile, giving about 2 weeks of sort of head start on when the game is coming out. So once you've established what your launch date is, you give them about 2 weeks, you send them the keys, send them all the press info, and then follow up every couple of days until you're getting up to the launch window. And if you haven't heard anything back, then you send them a note like every day, 3 days before launch. Like, hey,
yeah. I mean, it's basically,
you see this?
In short, give yourself plenty of time. I think the idea, because that kind of end of that question was interesting, which is what if you're done earlier than your launch date? You're not.
Yeah, there's no end to the work.
There's no end to the work.
I've never heard a game developer go, "Hey, my game's done."
Yeah, but but even if it was, that just means now you have more time to do better marketing and preparation for your launch. And I think it's actually important because this is a discussion that we had a lot back when we launched Crashlands. We just had to get it out because we had no money left, and we had set a date, so there was no wiggle room. We just had to put the thing out, right? But now that we actually have a runway, we could actually complete a game and then not launch it for some period of time. And that's actually how we talk about it now, because the idea is that once the game is complete, that's when we know we can set a date, and we know what it is. We have all the things that we would need to market it properly. And unless we're out of money, that means, well, now we still have runway left that we can use to turn the entire studio's engine over to marketing the ever living fuck out of that thing, right? So that it then has the best chance possible at a successful launch. And even if we don't need to do that, the people who are responsible for marketing, so Sam and then probably Monique at that point, they'll be able to do that full time while the rest of the crew is working on other stuff, building some other tech to help with the launch, polishing things, and interacting with the community, or even getting started on prototypes for the next thing. And so you don't, if you're running a studio, then you don't need to be completely coupled to the products that you're making if you have a runway. So then
Which
I think
is the big if, because
that's the huge
most
if.
Places, as we've learned from reading Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, everyone's just
limited
riding that line up to bankruptcy.
Right. Yeah. So if you really are just taking every possible moment, then that's exactly what it is. But I think the ideal world is the one that we're trying to create for ourselves here, which is that we get games out without actually being at the end of or get games done without being at the end of our runway, so that we have plenty of time to recover and figure out how to launch that thing, and then also recover from the launch of that thing.
If it's bad or good.
So that launching games becomes part of what we do as a company, and not the one thing that the company does.
Yeah. So also was one extra component, which is, I see this a lot in various game dev communities. People talking about how you should not launch in like November, December, October, because that's when like a bunch of AAA games are coming out and you can't compete with them. So what do we think about this?
Well, I would avoid launching during the store takeover sales. For example, the summer sale and the winter sale. And I think there's a fall sale now too.
It's not you're guaranteed no featuring if you launch.
Yeah, and that's just because the front page is it's just all fucked up. So don't launch during those.
And also everything is on sale. So instead of, if you're not launching also on sale, then you actually are in competition with literally the entire market.
Yeah,
correct.
And you need to be very aware of not specific games launching, because they're going to get like a feature spot, and there's still other feature spots, right? You need to be more aware of these sort of power players, specifically like Disney, for example. This is something that we anticipated, thankfully, correctly. We were thinking about launching Crashlands right before Christmas,
December 18th.
In December 2015. We looked at the calendar and we were like, Star Wars, the new Star Wars movie is coming out. There hasn't been a Star Wars movie in a long time.
I wonder if there's going to be games.
I wonder if they're going to launch games, and I wonder, or even if not, I wonder if they're going to cut some deal with
highlight all the old games,
or do something where there's going to be a huge store takeover of Star Wars. Sure enough, so we just said it's not worth the risk. We'll postpone, and it just turned out that we had to postpone for over a month just because of the stores shutting down over Christmas and all this other stuff. So we postponed it, and thankfully we did, because if we had tried to launch Crashlands that week, it game over for the studio. Literally, it would have been zero, right? Yeah. And the same thing is like Super Mario Run.
Yeah, it took over all of the app stores.
They gave it every feature spot, right? And so it's not necessarily about like competing with a game. It's more about competing for feature spots and trying to figure out what's the probability that the store is basically going to be shut down or completely focused on this game or on this event. So you want to basically just look for really, really quiet weeks where there's no big movies. Like, I can guarantee you, when the Avengers Infinity War comes out, don't launch your game that month, right? Like, because that's everything's going to be Avengers.
Yeah, but as far as actual competition you know, I mean, you got to eat some humble pie. You're not competing with AAA studios.
Nobody's going to look at your game and then like Call of Duty 39 or whatever and be like,
I was going to buy
my 39th copy of Call of Duty, but not this time.
Yeah, you're actually, the nice thing about being an indie dev is actually you're competing in a different market from the AAA studios. And Adam's done actual statistical analysis of this to ask the question of when to launch a game.
We do have a blog post. We have a blog
post about it.
That's true.
It doesn't matter when you launch. It does not matter. Even if you launch during quote unquote like AAA season, which is, I think there's April or something like that, which is right before the financial year turns over. Because everyone wants their numbers propped up, and then November so that they can have all the sales and stuff from Christmas. So
holiday stuff.
Those are the two kind of big hot spots. Apparently, supposedly January is the dead month, but
that's when we launched.
It was great. So
we were like, perfect. That means there's nothing going on, so people can actually pay attention to our game.
But we don't know. I mean, it is possible we would have done better had we launched.
We can't A/B test the universe.
We just can't know. But all we can say is from looking at. If you look at all the games that were on Steam, which is what I looked at a while ago, and look at their number of units owned by players as a function of the month in which they launched, there is little or no relationship between those things. And things are actually pretty well sampled. People are launching stuff kind of all the time. That doesn't mean that there definitely is not a relationship. It just means if there is one, it's weak. It's either very weak or very specific, so that it doesn't show up in the context of like, you know, month by month kind of things, because maybe a certain week is really bad.
You can't statistically test for, hey, when Super Mario Run launches, how well do other games do, right? Because that just happened anomalous. It happened one time,
right?
So you can't.
So our strategy is basically to ask, what do we know? And I mean, Steam has like the upcoming games. Right. And
you go look and see what's coming.
Just go look and see what's
coming.
And then
you Google and you say, you just say upcoming games of 2018.
Yep. So look at Touch Arcade for iOS. And we found
PC
a few.
Gamers always got a list. Rocket Shotgun's got a list.
So we found a bunch of listings of games that were coming out. We just tried to find a week where it seemed like there weren't any other like big exciting things that people were really pumped about coming out. Because that just meant that the chances of us getting, you know, the best feature spots were really good.
There's one other thing you can do. So on Steam, they have a coming soon list, and the games are listed in order of release on there, right?
Yep.
And one of the things we did with Crashlands was we were looking at that list and where we were on it. We realized every game surrounding us is brown.
Oh yeah.
All the icons were kind of desaturated.
Yeah, all the icons are desaturated and gray.
So we went and we ramped ours up.
Yeah. So we buffed up the saturation for ours and really highlighted, like, we picked the wallpaper that was like the yellow, like the Savannah, you know, and we really buffed it up so that like you'd see this coming soon list and it's like, and it's like Crashlands is like right there in bright yellow, you know.
Well, I do want to talk about this timing thing though, because even with so we send out, this is actually an important note with the Scuffle Buddies announcement. Because there's this big question in email marketing of what is the best time to send people notes about stuff. And comically, talking about this idea of, you know, looking at the calendars and making sure you pick a day that necessarily there's not a lot of stuff going on. We launched Scuffle Buddies the week after PAX, which some would say is a terrible idea.
Or you mean we announced it?
Or we announced it, yeah. So the week after PAX. And that's because I looked at the calendar and didn't even notice, because we took it off our calendar because we weren't going. Right. The PAX is happening. So we decided to do this, and then I sent out the emails basically a week in advance saying, hey, we have this thing. We're announcing it. Would you join us in announcing this thing? A lot of people are at PAX. A lot of the news is about games that are on the floor there. And we ended up sending the first email set at like 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, the night before PAX started. Which, again, probably supposedly a terrible idea. But what I found from that one that sent at 7 p.m. versus the one I sent as a follow-up, to people who definitely did not open that first one, was that the opening rate was basically the same, even though the second one came at like noon, or like what you consider a much easier time to open your emails. So there's always a bunch of debates about what the best time is to do these things. And I think,
well, the logic could go literally either direction.
It can.
Because you can say everybody thinks that you're not supposed to email these people during an event like PAX, which means that nobody's emailing them, which means if I send my email, I'm the only one, right? So I get the full attention.
PAX is when they're trying to keep their schedules really tight, understand like all the things they're supposed to be doing.
They're going to be checking their email a lot during PAX.
But that doesn't mean they're going to respond to you, because if your email is not PAX related, they may open it
and then
delete it or snooze it.
I got PAX shit to do, and then forget about it. Which is also, I mean, it's all completely.
It's more random.
You can make up your own narrative.
But I think the important thing is again, it's much more random than you would like to think it is.
Well, especially on the small scale. So if you're sending out, like in Sam's case for the Scuffle Budget,
it's like 50 notes.
Yeah, it's like 50 emails, right? On that small of a scale, everybody is completely different. You don't even get to say like, ooh, people tend to open stuff only if it was sent like the evening before or whatever. Because even if that is true, like the kind of size of that effect is that's coming from like newsletters, which is a different kind of thing entirely, across hundreds of thousands or millions of people.
Right, like even if 1%, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Even if that effect is real, it's probably not very big.
Right.
And when it comes to emailing, your 50 PR people who are just literally entirely different people, right? That you can't make any claims about them as an average person, right? Then all this stuff just goes away. And then it comes down to diligence, which is if they don't respond, email them again. Yep. Which is not a thing you do with newsletters because that's what you call spam.
Yep.
So yeah, sending an email newsletter to like Sally from Montana, who is not in video games PR or whatever. Yeah, maybe it's better to send it at a time where she's not at work or something like that. But the rules just go out the window for PR people. Yeah. So
you should think about it. Have some narrative. Have a reason that you do things.
Have the truth, a personal truth.
And ideally try to test it a little bit so you can see if it turns out that it makes sense or doesn't. But just always know that whatever people are telling you, they can't fucking know.
Those things don't matter.
Yeah. Also, I want to make sure everybody recognizes I'm not saying people from Montana can't be in video games PR.
You're talking about Sally.
Just talking specifically about Sally.
Everyone knows Sally from Montana is not in video games PR.
Yeah, she's an accountant. She's very good at her job. She's just not interested in writing about video games, So, but she wants to play them. So, all right. So next question comes from Retro Banana Man NL. How do you time the things you are doing? In episode 110, you timed your prep time and how to batch it. So we've talked about timing stuff, about productivity. There's a thing you can use called Toggl, Toggl, which is a fantastic time tracking application. But I think we need to kind of go a little bit, kind of backtrack on this question to kind of give it a little bit more context. So we talk a lot about batching your operations and why that matters. And I think last week we had a bigger conversation in the office about just how impactful it is to think about how long different things take. And so last week on Tuesday, I had a day where I was like, I don't know if you guys ever had this, where like about 2 p.m. you're just kind of like, fuck, like I feel drained, like I'm just not having the most productive day or feeling very distractible or whatever. But then on Wednesday, I worked straight from 8 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. and I felt like my brain was on fire. Like
in a good way.
In a good way. Like I was so pumped that like I had a hard time sleeping because I got so much shit done. And the one thing different that I did on Wednesday was I spent the first 30 minutes of my day going through my task list and prioritizing things, breaking things down, and turning everything I could into a pre-planned like 5 to 15 minute task. And then I just spent the entire day just going down the list, just one thing after
those tasks.
Yeah. And
which is what I did on Thursday.
How'd it feel?
Felt really good.
It works. And
I did it over the weekend. I got an ungodly amount of stuff done over this weekend.
Yeah. And so like I gave a talk a while back called Do What You Want, where I talked about the idea of pre-deciding what you're going to do and how for most people, like an exercise plan or a diet plan or whatever, like these things fail because people will say, I'm going to start exercising more. The end. Like that's the end of their statement. And then on Monday they go, I'm going to exercise today. What am I going to do? And then they have to think through, like they have to make the decision where to go, when to do it. Right. What are they going to not do? And then they have to also figure out.
Actually, but it starts earlier than that because on Monday they say, I need to exercise more again, because that's the goal, right? That doesn't even mean that you should exercise today.
Right. Just more, which is arbitrary enough that you could exercise just any time and you would have met that goal. Right. And so you sort of, by not pre-planning it, you've now recreate the burden of planning that every single day. Right. Which means you're just going to fall off of that wagon almost immediately.
Let's talk about the math that you did. Yeah, because the whole point here is that you found that the difference between Tuesday and Wednesday was essentially that on Tuesday you were at the completion of any given task, you had to step back and say, okay, what am I doing now?
What's next?
blah, blah, blah. You actually had to switch into planning.
Yep.
And then switch back into doing stuff.
Yeah. And so it's like task switching. People often talk about this in productivity, blogs and books and whatever, that task switching is one of the most expensive mental things that you can do, because you need to you sort of think about like you're juggling, right? Like you're juggling all these ideas in your brain to do a specific task. And now to switch and do something completely different, you got to drop all that stuff, pick up, dig through your bin, pick up a new set of juggling balls, start juggling those, and then drop those again to switch back to the other thing. And it can take on the order of, 5 minutes to switch from one task to another, just to sort of get your mind into the right mode to start doing the new thing, which is also why the idea of multitasking is bullshit, because now you're just doing lots of things really, really badly. And so if you think about planning as a task, then it becomes obvious that planning each thing right before you do it becomes incredibly expensive, because now you go do a thing, switch, plan a thing, switch, do a thing, right? Which means for every one thing you want to accomplish, you're actually doing 4 things. Plan, switch, thing, switch, plan, switch, thing, switch, right? So but if you pre-plan everything, then you spend a half hour or whatever, go as detailed as you can and pre-decide all of the problems you're going to be facing. Then you just plan for 30 minutes, and then you just go thing, switch, thing, switch, thing, switch. And so the math came out was, I think it was like, I made some assumptions that it takes 3 minutes to switch to a task, 15 minutes per thing you do. What does that look like? And it was like in an 8-hour work day, if you pre-plan, you're going to do 51 things, 25 of which are going to be actual productive tasks, and the remainder of which are switching. If you plan stuff in between your tasks instead of up front, you're going to end up doing like 70 something things, 18 of which are actually the things that you want to be doing.
So you do more work.
You do way more work, and you get a lot less done.
Right. And this is what we talk about.
And you're just fucking worn out by the end of the day.
Right. Well, I think it's an interesting thing is I think when people talk about trying to work on a thing that's important to them, or trying to get more done in the day, I think people oftentimes are just you're just trying too hard.
Do less.
You have to, you figure out how to make it such that, because it should be the case that, because I think that the biggest and most important takeaway from that is actually that at the end of the workday is that you still have a fuckload of energy.
Yeah, because you haven't had to constantly dig back and think through.
Whereas if you're switching a bunch, you just feel dead, and that's no way
because
to end
switching
your day.
between tasks,
no way to live.
Switching between things is not a rewarding activity. No. And it turns out to be most of what you do when you approach things that way. There's
a subtlety here, though, which is something I was over the weekend. I was thinking about it because I was trying to figure out what this was, which is basically I fell off of this bandwagon a long time ago, because I was in workflow all the time. I was always nailing out my tasks and stuff, and a lot of that was because I had so many different kinds of things to do that otherwise I would fall into this trap that we're talking about. But once we brought in new people and I got to start dedicating my time to, these big projects that are what I'm working on, I treated those projects. So like building Bscotch ID, right? I treated those projects as the task. So build Bscotch ID is just like a checkbox. But even, and it would be smaller than that, right? Yeah. But still not an actual task. And so I would say, okay, well today I need to, document, actually even like this week, one of my top general things to do is to document an API that I made, right? So in the past, I would just say, cool, that's the thing I'm working on. So in the morning, I would get up and then I would just start documenting my API. Right? But the problem there is that's what I've been doing. It's a lot of small tasks. And so it actually, even though I felt like I was doing one thing, what I was actually doing was exactly what we were talking about, which is switching between a lot of, sure, they were related tasks, but I kept having to recompute, like, okay, what am I documenting next? How am I documenting? What have I done before? There was nothing that was actually being tracked anywhere. So I couldn't just go to the next thing, because the mental model I had to build, you had to rebuild it. It had to be rebuilt, but also it was very complex, because I wasn't offloading any of my mental model onto a management system. And I think that's where it clicked. And that's where the value comes from, is that when you are doing this, what you're doing is you're pre-building a mental model of the job you have to do today. Right. Yep. And then you're putting that into a system that now that holds your model. You get to just fucking forget. Now all of your mental energy goes into just getting the shit done and not constantly rebuilding the mental model. So you build it once and you cache it. Yep. then you just go get to work and you just literally, you just got to forget about that stuff.
Well, I think it's part of the difference between the inherent switching cost in doing art versus doing programming. Because when I look back at a drawing, I'm not confused about where it's at. I just look at it like, yep, there it is.
That looks like a leaf.
That shadow, right? It's halfway done. I can just see it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a much quicker uptake of whatever the mental model is because it's actually there. It's not a mental model.
There's no hidden pieces of it.
Well, actually, that's equivalent
elsewhere.
Yeah, that is equivalent to the to-do list or the checklist that then I have to create to put my API documentation together. Because again, it's a thing that I've offloaded to another system, so it's just not in my brain. And it might be that it never had to be in your brain in the first place because you're actually just working on that system, right? In some particular kinds of cases. But if you were an artist that actually went through things in particular kinds of phases where you were like, okay, so first I need to build a silhouette, and then I need to add these components, and I need to do some color palette work, and then I need to put some shadows on, and then so if that was actually how you did things, then having that list would actually be enormously helpful because you basically not get to benefit from both of those things. Where on the one hand, you're always like, okay, now I know what's next, I know what I've done, I feel like I can measure kind of the progress that I've made through this thing. But also you just get to look at the thing that you've made and it just speaks to you and tells you what's next.
And also just as an experiment. So I did this last week. I did it on Wednesday, I did it on Thursday, easily some of my most productive work days I've had in months. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to flip this back this weekend. Cause I had a project that I'm working on, which, should I talk about? All right. We got a fun toy that we're working on. And I was like, I'm going to get this thing done this weekend. And I thought, just for contrast, now that I've got this figured out, I'm just going to fly into this thing blind.
Just go off the rails.
And just see what it's like to have literally no system at all. Not even a to-do list, and just be like, I know vaguely what I need to build.
So you sat down to do work.
I just sat down and worked on it. And holy fuck, it took me like 3 times longer than I thought it would. And I was so distractible. Like I had a hard time focusing on the thing, and I was always trying to find something else.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that it took down my distractibility enormously.
Yeah. Because it's really like those task switching moments where we have to replan the next step.
They're exhausting. You don't want to do it.
You don't want to do it. And those are the opportunities for you to be like, and then I'm gonna go watch a stupid YouTube video or something.
Let's do a challenge for the podcast listeners this week. The switch list challenge.
Switch list.
So try to maybe take like 15, 20 minutes beginning your day, plan out what you're doing for the
Maybe
whole
we should
day.
call it de-switching. It's kind of like decaf coffee. Like you still got to have some in there because you can't get it all out.
What about switch-O-WEEN?
Switch. We'll call it Switch-O-WEEN week.
Switch-O-WEEN.
Switch-O-WEEN. So the goal is every day you sit down, give yourself a half an hour.
Okay.
You don't need to get up early. Like this is work.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
This is you doing your shit. So you get up, you do your normal thing, except your first task of the day is to get all of your tasks pre-planned into like 5 to 15 minute chunks of things that you need to do.
You got to make sure that you have things in there you can actually do. Like API documentation is not a thing you could do.
No, it is not.
So, but you can like write out a particular section of that API.
Document this.
But you can't just do a 20-page documentation.
Yeah, so plan that out, and then we have our new email address that you can reach us at, which is
podcast@bscotch.net.
Yes,
correct.
So send us an email there if you do it, and maybe we'll share some stuff on the next show if anything good comes in there, and we'll see what this actually works for you guys and gals.
It's amazing.
There's also a question of how sustainable is it? Because I think the reason that this is so hard is because for whatever reason, there's an enormous amount of inertia preventing a person from sitting down and planning stuff. And I think it's because planning is super hard because that's you building the whole model of like the future, right? And so it, just like all the other tasks which we have to do throughout the day, is something you don't want to do and makes you distractible. At least that's been my experience while doing it. And so it's sort of like taking all of those switching moments,
You collapse it.
and you put it all in one place, which means it's like mega hard to do it. But that also means that's where all the value comes from. So
But I think it's also,
not to say it's easy. It's a thing you just got to try to do.
Right. But we don't, I think generally as a culture, and maybe just humans in general, we value cures much more than prevention. Right. It's way sexier to come in during the bonfire and like throw water on it than it is to just stop the bonfire from happening by not being an idiot in the first place.
And it doesn't feel active.
Right.
You want to get in there, sit down, and just start going. You want to start quote working. Right?
Yeah, planning is part of the work, And
you're going to have to
more valuable even than the work itself oftentimes. So
a failure to plan is a plan to fail.
that's right. End on that good quote.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. So we'd like to thank our studio wrangler, Monique, for putting this episode together, our producer, Fat Barb, for making us sound good, and the Bscotch dev team, Andy, Tifa, and Sher, for continuing to jam on stuff while we're in here podcasting. Special thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord and forums running. And of course, we'd like to thank you all, our listeners, for coming back every week to listen. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, hop into our Discord server, which you can find at bit.ly/bsdiscord.
I noticed we don't actually have a channel for the podcast in there.
I feel like we
Is that
should.
a thing we should do?
Maybe.
Yeah, we're going to make one.
Okay.
Cool.
The Discord now has categories.
Yeah.
So we could make some categories.
Probably a channel's fine, but yeah.
Like a channel or category. Anyways. So yeah, that's at bit.ly/bsdiscord. Come say hi. We also have a mailbox. So if you'd like to send us a letter, candy, head on over to mailbox.bscotch.net. And as we mentioned just a moment ago, if you want to just send us an email, you can just send it over to podcast@bscotch.net. Also, we depend on word of mouth and reviews to get new listeners. We are pushing for that 100 iTunes reviews. So if you're listening, Apple Podcasts, I need to update my text.
Your cache is wrong. You got an invalid cache.
Invalid caching error. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, help us out by going to bit.ly/CWBApple. Give us a 5-star review. It'll help us out a lot. It'll help us spread the word and give us opportunities to get the podcast featured in other areas. So we really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.